Today on the show, we're going to be talking about the 5-in-1, the Stepford Cuckoos. If you didn't know that they helped Elixir gain a PhD level of intelligence, then this show is for you. So, the Stepford Cuckoos. They were created by Grant Morrison and would first appear in New X-Men 118 in 2001. Now, before we get into their story, there are some facts that we need to go over. First off, one of the Stepford Cuckoos was originally supposed to be called Irma, but Grant Morrison never had her name said out loud during his run, so when Chuck Austen took over the New X-Men, he had her called Mindy. This was a huge mistake because the Cuckoos' names were Sophie, Phoebe, Irma, Celeste, and Esme, and thus spelled out Spice as a shout out to the Spice Girls. I think this is a prime example of why it's important for writers to talk to one another, especially when one writer is taking over another writer's series. Like, it'll just be a 10-minute phone call and we could avoid mistakes like this. As for the title of the Stepford Cuckoos, that actually comes from two novels, The Stepford Wives and The Midwich Cuckoos. Now, while I'm not going to get into the Stepford Wives plot, a Stepford wife is essentially a wife that blindly follows the ideals of an all-American woman. The Midwich Cuckoos, however, is a story about a village where all the women mysteriously get pregnant at the same time, and when they give birth, all of their children are identical blonde babies. As these children grow, it is revealed that they have terrifying psychic powers, and you put these together and you get the Stepford Cuckoos. The Cuckoos story would begin when Emma Frost was in a coma and Dr. Sublime would harvest eggs from her for the Weapons Plus program. Sublime would create a weapon that had combined telepathic powers and the ability to wipe out every mutant on Earth, and the weapon was called Weapon Number 14. Thousands of girls were created, but only 5 were sent to the Xavier Institute to learn how to hone their powers for their intended purpose. The first thing that the girls would do upon arriving at the Xavier Institute was place a psychic block on each of the faculty members so they couldn't figure out who the girls were and where they're from. The girls would eventually gain the name the Stepford Cuckoos due to their personality, but their actual codename was the 5-in-1. What I find really interesting is that the girls grew really close to Emma Frost and actually became her protégés, and they also took psychic classes with Professor X along with Quentin Quire. Now, you might remember from my Quentin Quire video, but Quentin actually had a crush on Sophie, but the Cuckoos did not like him at all. They saw him as weird. Quentin would eventually find out that he was adopted and he couldn't handle this in his mind, so he took the drug Kick, which amplifies mutant powers, and caused a riot at the X mansion. Cuckoos would actually stop him by sneaking into Cerebra and using Kick on Sophie to amplify all of their powers, and then they would shoot him with a psychic blast. But the worst part of all of this is that Sophie couldn't handle the Kick and it caused her death. What we didn't know until a little bit later was that Esme also took Kick, and she was the one that pushed Sophie towards her death. Without Sophie, the girls became the 4-in-1, and they were obviously slightly weaker now, and they weren't exactly happy about that. So they blamed Emma Frost for their misfortune, stating that Emma Frost was the one that encouraged them to go and fight. Naturally, these girls wouldn't leave it there. They had to get revenge, so they would tell Jean Grey about the psychic affair between Cyclops and Emma Frost. Esme would also try killing Emma Frost and then running away, but fortunately Emma would be saved by the X-Men, Beast, and Jean Grey with the Phoenix. Esme had become very unstable at this point. She had taken so much Kick that she was mentally damaged. She was also romantically involved with Zorn, but would call him out one time when he didn't return her affections, but then he would turn around and lodge her earrings in her brain, thus killing her. Eventually, the Institute would need to be rebuilt and its leadership was taken over by Cyclops and Emma Frost, and all of the students were assigned to squads and had a mentor. Cuckoos were actually the leaders of the Corsairs squad under the mentorship of Cyclops. It's around this time that the Phoenix Force would come to Earth, wake up Quentin Quire, and Quentin Quire would try reviving Sophie and she would reject him and pass away yet again. Eventually, M-Day would come about and the 3-in-1 would retain their powers, but Emma Frost would put all the remaining mutant students into an all-out battle royale to decide who would become the new X-Men. And the 3-in-1 hated this idea and didn't take part and just told Cyclops. This is where things get really good. Eventually, a small fraction of the Phoenix Force would light up inside of the girls, and their Weapon Plus nanotech would be activated. The girls would return to Sublime's lab, and the Phoenix and Sublime were battling it out for control over the 3-in-1. The X-Men would turn up and try to help, but Phoebe and Irma would be integrated into Sublime's machine, but Celeste would fully merge with the Phoenix. But then she would be integrated into Sublime's machine, and the Phoenix would split across the 3-in-1. This activated their second mutation, Organic Diamond Hearts, and it trapped the Phoenix Force inside of them, and this activated the 1000-in-1. Here's what's really interesting. Celeste was actually able to resist both the Phoenix and Sublime's total control long enough to allow the X-Men to disconnect the girls from the machine. Phoebe would be pissed about this whole situation and would create a power surge that caused a giant explosion, killing off the 1000-in-1 and just leaving the 3-in-1 alive. The whole situation was really messy, but what's important for you to take note of was that it ended with a fragment of the Phoenix Force trapped inside of all 3 girls, and they were able to control it really well. After this, the girls would become weirdly rebellious, like they would interfere with people telepathically. Like they would help Elixir steal a PhD level knowledge straight from Beast's brain. Also, when the Hulk came to the Institute, the girls would use Cerebra to contact the X-teams from around the world. They would also use Cerebra to try and locate Hope Summers after her birth. Eventually, a group of Predator X's would attack Utopia, and the girls would help out on the end of Cerebra, but then the Phoenix Force fragment that was trapped inside of them would escape and the girls would fall unconscious mid-battle. This made the girls really depressed because they were really powerful one minute and not so powerful the next. This being said, they are still really powerful in comparison to the average mutant. Eventually, Cyclops and Wolverine would split off from one another and the girls had to decide where they wanted to go. Phoebe wanted to go with Wolverine to Westchester, but Irma wanted to stay on Utopia with Cyclops, so everything just came down to Celeste. Celeste didn't like that Quentin Quire went with Wolverine. Eventually, the Phoenix Force would return to Earth looking for a new host, and this was the beginning of the Avengers vs. X-Men. The Cuckoos were actually detained in the Avengers Academy, but then they would sneak off to the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, where they would use Cerebra. Here, they would actually see the death of Professor X and the re-emergence of mutant kind worldwide. And that's as far as we're going to go, because after that it's Marvel Now, and we don't talk about Marvel Now on this show. Yet. I really like the Cuckoos, but I enjoy reading them. I don't think I could ever write them. They're not the type of character I could write. I feel like in recent times they've been made a bit redundant, but I do see that changing in the future because I do admit they've got a lot of potential. It's super effective! Okay guys, that is it for today. If you think I missed anything about the Stepford Cuckoos, please let me know in the comments down below. And also don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more history, and also don't forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. My name is Faust, this has been Exploring Comics, and it is super effective.